There is a fungus alive right now that reaches inside a living ant's body, wraps itself around every single muscle fiber, and forces that ant to march, against every instinct it has, to a precise location, to a precise height, to its own death. 48 million years before any human being ever walked this earth, this fungus was already doing this. And there is one discovery, made under a microscope in a university lab, that changes everything we thought we knew about how this process actually works. I will tell you exactly what that discovery is before this video ends, but it is not what you think. Most people scroll past videos like this. If you make it to the final minute, you will understand why this is one of the most disturbing findings in all of biology. By the end of this, you will know exactly how Ophiocordyceps unilateralis, the fungus that controls ant brains, takes over a living body from the inside out, and you will never see the natural world the same way again. Before we get to the fungus itself, let me give you some context. Because what Ophiocordyceps does to ants is not a bizarre outlier. It is one entry in a very long list of nature's mind control experiments. There are parasitic wasps that inject venom directly into cockroach brains, not to kill them, but to remove only their escape instinct, leaving them alive, docile, and willing to be led by the antenna into a burrow where they become living food for larvae. There are horsehair worms that infect crickets, grow inside them for months, then commandeer their nervous systems to make them walk into water and drown, so the worm can complete its aquatic life cycle. The cricket drowns, so the parasite can swim. There are jewel wasps, Gordian worms, Toxoplasma gondii, each one a different mechanism, each one perfected by millions of years of ruthless evolution. Nature invented mind control, and Ophiocordyceps unilateralis may be the most sophisticated, the most precise, and the most philosophically disturbing version of all of them. What makes it truly different from every parasite you just heard about is something I will explain in a moment. Once you understand it, you cannot unknow it. And what I am about to reveal next challenges everything you understand about what it means to be in control of your own body. Now, what I am about to describe sounds like something from a horror film, but every detail is documented, peer-reviewed, and reproducible in labs around the world. Ophiocordyceps unilateralis is a parasitic fungus belonging to a genus called Cordyceps, a family of over 400 known species. Each one evolved to parasitize a specific insect host. Some target beetles, some target moths, some target flies. But Ophiocordyceps unilateralis has one target and one target only: carpenter ants. One fungus, one host species, one catastrophic outcome. The specificity is extraordinary. The fungus has co-evolved with particular ant species across Southeast Asia, South America, and Africa for millions of years. The relationship is so finely tuned that if it infects the wrong ant species, even a closely related one, the infection simply fails to complete. It dies. It needs this exact ant, in this exact environment, following this exact daily routine. Precision built by time. Scientists have identified dozens of distinct Ophiocordyceps species, each specialized for a different ant on a different continent. The arms race between fungus and host has been running for longer than most living species have existed, and the mechanism it uses, the actual biological process by which it seizes control, is where this story goes from fascinating to genuinely unsettling. What happens next changes how you understand the word infection entirely. Stop and think about this for a second. The moment an ant walks through a patch of forest floor where Ophiocordyceps spores are present, it is already over. It just does not know it yet. The infection begins on the surface of the ant's body. The fungus produces microscopic reproductive cells called conidia, spores so tiny that hundreds of thousands of them can fit on the tip of a single finger. When a spore lands on ant exoskeleton, it detects chemical signals specific to its host: recognition, confirmation. Then it secretes enzymes that dissolve a microscopic opening through the outer shell. It drills through the armor. Then it goes completely quiet. Once inside, the fungus does not spread the way mold spreads. It transforms into individual yeast-like cells, single, mobile units. that slip between tissues and travel silently through the body's interior spaces. The ant's immune system detects these cells and sends defenders. White blood cell equivalents rush to intercept, and the fungus neutralizes them every single time. It has been fighting this exact immune response long enough to develop a complete, evolved counter-strategy against it. If this is already making you deeply uncomfortable, hit like and subscribe, because what happens inside this ant is even darker. The real takeover, that is just beginning. Here is where the story takes its darkest turn yet. Most parasites that hijack behavior attack the brain directly. They inject toxins. They create lesions. They physically interfere with neural tissue. Ophiocordyceps does none of this. Researchers at Penn State University, led by behavioral ecologist David Hughes, spent years tracking exactly where the fungal cells actually travel inside an infected ant. Using fluorescent tagging and electron microscopy, they followed individual cells through the entire body. What they found shocked them. Not the brain. The brain was essentially fungus-free. The neurons intact, functional, healthy. The ant is not mindless. It is aware, and it cannot stop. The fungal cells had traveled everywhere. Abdomen, thorax, legs, head, but they had wrapped themselves specifically around individual muscle fibers. Not the neurons, not the brain, the muscles. Every muscle fiber colonized. The fungus bypassed the control center entirely. It does not rewire the brain. It cuts the cable between the brain and the body. Then it becomes the new cable. It sends its own signals. It moves the limbs. It sets the direction. And the ant's brain, fully conscious, fully aware, is simply no longer consulted. What the body does next is entirely decided by the fungus. And what it decides to do is not random. It is a program. And what it chooses to do with that body should disturb every single one of us. This next part is the one that kept me up at night. Within days of infection, sometimes within hours, the ant's behavior begins to change, subtly at first, then dramatically. A healthy ant is a supremely social creature with assigned roles, specific foraging routes, and precise schedules. Infected ants begin to deviate from all of it. The behavioral progression follows a documented, repeatable sequence that researchers can now identify at each stage. 1. Abandons foraging trail and wanders. 2. Falls and loses coordination. 3. Gets carried away by nestmates. 4. Climbs vegetation at unusual hours. 5. Bites leaf vein and locks jaw permanently. The colony detects this deviation immediately. Ants are extraordinarily skilled at reading the chemical health signals of nestmates. When they identify an infected ant, they do not wait. They carry it far from the nest and deposit it in what researchers call a social graveyard. Quarantine. Nature invented epidemic containment millions of years before we did. But even in exile, the infected ant is not simply deteriorating. The fungus is building density, accumulating control, calibrating. Researchers have documented infected ants showing elevated body temperatures, possibly the fungus generating metabolic heat to prime muscle chemistry. Their mandibles begin to operate with increasing independence from normal neural input. Something is directing them toward a very specific destination, and that destination is calculated with a mathematical precision that every researcher who encountered it found almost impossible to believe. Now forget everything you think you know about how biological instinct works. What I am about to describe does not feel like a natural process shaped by selection pressures. It feels like a program being executed by remote control. When fungal density reaches a sufficient threshold, typically 7 to 14 days after infection, the ant begins to climb, not randomly, not in a panic, with deliberate, directed purpose. It selects a plant, approaches with intent, begins ascending, and then stops. Researchers measured this behavior across thousands of infected ants. The data is consistent across different forests, different continents, different ant species. Infected ants consistently stop their ascent at approximately 25 centimeters above the forest floor. At that precise height, temperature and humidity are optimal for fungal sporulation and spore dispersal. The fungus built a measuring instrument out of a living nervous system, a thermometer, a hygrometer, out of an ant's body. The ant then moves to the underside of a leaf, selects one with a prominent main vein, and positions itself. Then, at solar noon, at the precise peak of foraging activity for other ants, it bites, and it does not let go. Researchers call this the death grip. What happens to the jaw in that exact moment is something even trained scientists found difficult to accept. And the explosion that comes next makes everything you have just heard look like a warm-up. What I am about to tell you has been confirmed by multiple independent research teams using high-resolution electron microscopy. The ant bites the leaf vein, and then it dies. But the jaw does not open, locked forever, permanently sealed. When researchers examined the jaw muscles of these ants, they expected to find muscle tissue locked in extreme contraction, like a cramp frozen in place. What they found instead was more disturbing. The muscle tissue had been replaced, colonized so thoroughly by fungal cells that what remained was no longer primarily muscle. It was fungal tissue, permanently contracted, not a clenched muscle, a structural replacement. The ant is dead. The fungus has consumed the jaw mechanics and locked them in a closed position as a final architectural feature. The host doesn't die holding on. It becomes the thing that holds. As Marcus Aurelius once wrote about nature's relentless process of transformation, loss is nothing else but change, and change is nature's delight. Inside the dead body, the fungus now enters its final reproductive phase. The stalk, called a stroma, erupts from the ant's body, most dramatically from between the head and thorax, or directly from the head itself. Over days it lengthens and develops spore-bearing capsules called perithecia, and the release of those spores is not passive, not scattered. It is calibrated, and the scale of what happens next is something that still astonishes every researcher who has studied it. If you thought that was disturbing, you are not ready for this. After the ant dies in its death grip position on the underside of the leaf, the stalk lengthens through the body over several days. The spore-bearing structures rupture. Hundreds of thousands of individual spores burst outward, not a random cloud. Research shows the spores are released in a tight cylindrical zone, approximately 1 square meter of forest floor directly below the hanging corpse, the infection zone, the killing field. Any ant that walks through that exact patch of ground in the following weeks risks picking up spores and beginning this entire cycle again. The ants seem to know this. Colonies have been documented establishing dedicated disposal zones, areas where infected ants are consistently deposited, often hundreds of meters from the main nest. A form of epidemiological self-defense that predates human medicine by tens of millions of years. The ant's death becomes the mechanism for the next ant's doom. But here is the detail that elevates this from a disturbing story to a scientific revelation. Researchers studying these infection zones found leaf damage patterns consistent with the death grip bite preserved in sediment on fossilized leaves, ancient ones. And what those fossils revealed about this fungus is the part of this story that should disturb you the most. What comes next changes everything. Now here is where the story changes everything, and I mean everything. In 2010, a research team that included David Hughes examined fossilized leaves recovered from a 50-million-year-old geological deposit in Messel, Germany. On those leaves, they found a pattern of damage unmistakable to anyone who had studied Ophiocordyceps. The characteristic scalloped bite mark of the death grip, 48 million years ago, before the first human footprint, before the first human language, before written history by a margin that is nearly impossible to comprehend. This fungus was already calculating heights, already positioning ants on leaf veins, already locking jaws at solar noon, already erupting spores from dead ant skulls. It was perfecting this process before we existed to witness it. The evolutionary arms race between Ophiocordyceps and its hosts has been running longer than most of Earth's current mountain ranges have stood. And now, the discovery I promised you at the very beginning of this video, the one that changes everything. Researchers expected to find the brain consumed, invaded, destroyed. They found it untouched, the neurons functional, the awareness fully present, fully aware. The ant is not a zombie. It is a prisoner trapped inside its own body, completely conscious as it walks to its death. The fungus did not take the mind. It took the body away from the mind. The ant experiences every step of that death march. It feels the bite. It cannot stop it. Comment zombie ANT protocol if this just rewired how you see nature. Does it disturb you more that the brain is fully intact, or that this has been happening for 48 million years? Share this with as many people as you possibly can. This truth deserves to be heard. But here is the question this entire story forces us to ask. And it is not really about ants at all. What is control? What is agency? What does it mean to be the author of your own actions? The ant's brain works perfectly. Its neurons fire. It processes its environment. It is entirely aware. And none of that matters, because the machinery that converts awareness into action has been physically taken from it. The fungus does not need the mind. It needs only the body. And in taking the body, it renders the mind irrelevant. Philosophers have wrestled with free will for thousands of years. Descartes, Hume, Kant, all grappling with whether our choices are ever truly our own. Ophiocordyceps demonstrates, in documented biological terms, that awareness and agency are not the same thing. You can be completely conscious and completely unable to act. You can know exactly what is happening to you and be utterly powerless to change any of it. As Viktor Frankl, who understood captivity more profoundly than almost any human being in history, once wrote, "Between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose." For the ant, that space has been surgically removed by a fungus 48 million years in the making. The deepest horror of this story is not the exploding head, not the death grip. It was home the whole time. The ant was there, watching, and it could not stop any of it. The truth is stranger than anything you could make up. Everything you just learned about Ophiocordyceps unilateralis is real. Every detail is documented, reproducible, and verifiable in peer-reviewed research. A fungus that has been perfecting this process for 48 million years, long before any human ever existed, built something that biology textbooks still struggle to fully classify. Is it predator or parasite? Is it mind control or body control? The answer to that question changes how you define both. There is something in this story that reaches beyond biology. It asks what freedom actually is. It asks whether awareness without agency has any meaning at all. And it reminds us that nature has been writing horror stories. Real ones, verifiable ones, documented under microscopes, for far longer than we have been here to read them. The truth is stranger than anything you could make up. If you made it this far, prove it. Comment zombie ant protocol below. That is the code for people who want to know the things that do not fit in textbooks. Subscribe to keep feeding that curiosity, because what comes next, you are genuinely not ready for it.